Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. After having a look at the aviation, the ground and the naval forces past the developers in February 2020, it's time to have a look now at the helicopters portion. Now there's only 3 of them, but they are at least interesting and there's a lot to them, so let's get into it. The first one is another machine from Sikorsky. This is the Sikorsky MH-60L DAP Blackhawk, and it is known as the Stalker of the Night. And this is also from Kev2Go, and as you can see, this is a nice frontal portrait of it. Let's talk about the MH-60L, where it came from, why the US used it, and also why it is around as an idea to be able to actually bring to the game. So in the late 1960s, the US, the United States Army in particular, began forming requirements for a helicopter to replace the Huey. The Huey H-1 at the time was still a very good helicopter, but definitely was at the point of improvement, let's say. And the program was known as the Utility Tactical Transport Aircraft System, or the UTTAS, and the Army also initiated the development of a new common turbine engine for its helicopters that would become the General Electric T-700. And based on the experience that the Army had in Vietnam, the Army required significant performance, survivability, and also reliability improvements from both the new power plant and also this new project. So they released the request for proposals in January of 1972, and the RFP also included air transport requirements. The transport aboard the C-130 limited the project cabin height and also length. The requirements were also for improved reliability, survivability, and also lower life cycle costs, which meant that dual engines with improved hot and high altitude performance were looked for, and also a modular design which would have a bunch of other stuff in it, such as reduced maintenance footprints. They wanted run-dry gearboxes, ballistically tolerant, redundant subsystems, so hydraulic, electrical, and flight controls. They wanted crash-worthy crew, so armored and troop seats, dual-stage Oleo main landing gear, ballistically tolerant crash-worthy main structure, quieter, more robust main and tail rotor systems, and a basically tolerant crash-worthy fuel system. So you can see pretty much overall they wanted everything improved when it came to the general structure of the machine and also the engines. So the UH-60A, the Blackhawks were actually used in the invasion of Grenada, which is kind of interesting, in 1983, and the conflict saw the first use of the UH-60 in combat, and there were 4 prototypes constructed. These were the YUH-60As, and these flew on the 17th of October 1974, and prior to the delivery of the prototypes, there was a evaluation which was conducted in November 1975 to make sure the aircraft could be operated safely while testing, and 3 of the prototypes were delivered to the Army in March 1976, and there was also a rival design by Boeing, or a Boeing Vertol design I should say, the YUH-61A, and one was kept by Sikorsky for internal research. The Army selected the UH-60 for production in December 1976, and deliveries to the Army began in October of 1978, with the family formally entering service in 1979. So due to the weight increases from the addition of mission equipment and also other changes, the Army ordered an improved version, the UH-60L, in 1987. This one incorporated more modifications for the UH-60A fleet. It featured more power, more lifting capability, and also basically just better engines. So the T-700 GE701Cs were used, a stronger gearbox as well, and both were developed also for their SH-60B Seahawk, which was around the place. So the variant that we're actually talking about obviously spawned from the historical background that I just read from you, and this summary is is the MH-60L, the Blackhawk, and it's the Army Special Operations version of the UH-60L. Obviously, you'll be familiar with this specific vehicle, and the aircraft provides medium and utility helicopter support for Special Operations Forces for their unique missions. And the primary mission of the MH-60L is to conduct overt and covert infiltration, exfiltration, and resupply of special forces across a wide range of environmental conditions. And then the secondary missions for it include external load, CSAR, and also medevac operations. The MH-60 is capable of operating from fixed base facilities, remote sites, or ocean-going vessels. It can pretty much do whatever you want. It is also equipped with the T700G E701Cs, so, you know, still an incredibly powerful platform. And also, there were many changes to it when it came to the cockpit, and also some other stuff, such as it was, depending on where it found combat, it really depended on what armament that it had, and it was also upgraded in the 90s with new subsystems when it came to its cockpit. So the armament that you'd find on this machine is either two 7.62 M240s or two 7.62 M134s, and or two just Gatling guns, the GAU-19s. It also had some hardpoints, either 4 or 2 per stub wings, and also provisions to carry 70mm Hydras, Hellfires, of course, Stingers, and it could also carry some externals, either 7.62s, 12.7s, 20s, or 30s. And also, it could be equipped with a volcano minefield dispersion system, which sounds really fun. But yeah, it's just as simple as that. It's a vehicle that you are probably very familiar with. It's another American vehicle which has access to all of the bells and whistles, and would go alongside very well the H-1Z and also the Apaches in the game. Pieve is back, and he is talking about an Italian-American vehicle. And today we're going to be talking about the Agusta-Bell AB 205. And that machine is, let's just see if I can find one of the good pictures in this little article, because there's a lot of really nice pictures in this one. I just want to make sure that we can see one of the nice ones. I suppose this one would be the best one, just to show you the overall armament of this machine, because it is incredibly dodgy if we want to talk about it. So what is the Agusta-Bell AB 205? Well, it's a variant of the Bell Model 205 helicopter, obviously. And this was a licensed production built version for the Italian Army. And it was licensed, produced in 1966 by the company, the Costruzioni Aeronautiche Giovanni Augusta Spa. And the difference between it compared to the American version, which you can tell it is based on, the difference between it and the 204 is that it has an elongated fuselage and the cabin in which 14 people can actually fit, and also a pilot, so technically 15 people. The helicopter is also increased with better engines than its American counterpart, T-53 gas turbine engines, and in order to realize the increased power of the engine, the dynamical systems of the helicopter underwent changes, and therefore the AB-205 rotor used a diameter of 14.63 meters, while the main rotor on the 204 was 13.41. So it's pretty much as simple as that. It's an elongated version of an already existing American helicopter. And Pieve in the article talks a lot about the different vehicles that were used by this specific squadron. So stuff like Chinooks, stuff such as A129s, and also stuff such as the 205. And the 205, the main thing to take away from all of this is it has some really cool, interesting interesting and weird and wonderful stuff on it. So it has access to obviously rocket launchers that you can see, a pair of 70mm ones, and also it has 2 external cylindrical containers which contain 3,000 7.62 caliber shots for the miniguns that you see below. So that is just a weapons holder, oh sorry, an ammunitions holder, which goes on the outside. So this thing could be attached with a bunch of rockets, a bunch of ammunition, and a few miniguns just to have a bit of fun with it. So it would be a nice vehicle to see. It's a pretty simple vehicle, would definitely be a low tier one, and it is an example of another helicopter that Italy could get to try and extend its ranks. The last vehicle is this crazy machine here. Now, if you don't know what this crazy machine is, this is the Vertol H21. Now, this is from Argyle, and we're talking from a French point of view, but understand this once again started as an American helicopter. And the interesting thing about this one is its ridiculous armament that the French put on it during the Algerian War, or at least, you know, they experimented with, let's say that. So let's talk about the Vertol H21 first. It was one of the first heavy helicopters ever made and mass-produced. It was the result of multiple attempts and prototypes before it was officially introduced, and it was developed for a long time, between 1945 and 1951. It first participated in the Korean War. It was built originally as an Arctic rescue chopper, and it could operate in rough and cold environments, and it was also very simple to maintain, because the vehicle itself was, you know, there wasn't too much to it, if that makes sense. And this is why during the 1950s, when the French engaged in the Algerian War, they wanted a more efficient machine that they could use, so therefore they decided to buy a bunch of them. They actually bought 108 of them. 108 helicopters were delivered to the French army. 98 of them were for the ALAT, which is the Aviation Légère de l'Armée de Terre, or, you know, the air units of the French ground forces, and 10 of them were delivered to the French Navy. And they decided that the army needed urgently stuff for Algeria, so they were sent straight there to be able to help out the conflict. They were ordered in 1955 and started arriving the same year until 1958. And the machines were useful and powerful enough to carry soldiers across the conditions of Algeria, which are mainly desert, and the losses kept rising though, which was a bit of a problem, especially because of rebel fire. So the helicopters were vulnerable to machine guns, not really a surprise, and also there was no way they could fight back. At this point, the Vertol H21s which were being used did not have any armaments on them. So the French decided that in 1957 they were going to actually start arming them. And we have some pretty interesting pictures of these, such as this monstrosity of a system. So Colonel Crespin, who had actually nicknamed these things the Flying Bananas, asked the US to experiment on the helicopters to see if they could add armament to it so it could protect itself. So the US Army then sent an engineer over, as well as the first prototype, to the French, and it was armed with various machine guns, 30 cals and 50 cals, and also some HVAR rockets. And the first tests looked good, but there were a few issues. The damages done by the power of the 50 cals and the HVARs to the machine after firing, obviously a little bit of a problem. The first French experiment, based on the test, started in 1958, and they kept the 30 cals on it, but removed the 12.7s, and also replaced the HVARs with Matra 122 rocket pods. And a lot of testing and layouts later, they experimented with a second loadout with different rocket pods, and you can find different pictures here. You can see the back with the 30 cals, the 50 cals, and the rockets, and then also you can see here with the different pods that this thing would have had. And then with all of that said, what they did is they also experimented with different stuff. So they found the ideal loadout, which they wanted. It was 2 Matra rocket pods as well as 2 gun pods with 2 AA-52 machine guns on them. And the experiments were also done on the Navy side, and they added a 20mm autocannon MG151 in 1959 and a configuration which would later be adopted by the naval H-34 that the French used. And the last loadout, which was finally adopted by the Air Force, and this was equipped on 7 of them with the gun pods and the rocket pods, and the armament was declared operational early in 1959 for a short time, but it was never, it was used in combat, I should say. It was never officially adopted by the Army, though, who considered it a waste of time and resources. The reason for that is because the Alouette 2 was around as a gun platform, and they much preferred that over this, the H-21, which is around the place. So eventually what happened was all of the stuff which was mounted on the H-21, when it came to rockets and guns and everything like that, were all just dismounted, put onto the Alouette 2, and those weapons were used in combat and did protect many Frenchmen, just not on the H-21. So this could definitely be, a vehicle which we could see in War Thunder under the idea of having, not a great armament. The US proposition was 2 30 cals, 2 50 cals, and 8 HVARs. Then the French experimental, 2 30 cals and 2 Matra rocket pods. And then you also had other stuff such as the second French experiment, 2 30 cals, 2 sets of Matra rocket pods, but different rocket pods. Then the third one, which was just 2 gun pods and 2 AA-52 machine guns, and then the final one, the 2 gun pods with 2 machine guns and the 2 sets of rocket pods as well. So you have plenty of options when it comes to the H-21. It would have a limited use, but it would be pretty interesting to see. Overall, 3 very fun aircraft, basically 3 American aircraft, which were given to other countries and slightly modified. So once again, obviously America being very dominant in the field of helicopters, but it would be nice to see all of these in game. There's no crazy options here. All of these saw some service in some way, so it would be lovely to see them. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I just want to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugene's Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.